next 4 weeks that we can each learn some skills that we can use both personally and to improve the collective communication skills of the whole community. And so it's perfectly okay in my mind if everybody's not here, because what we've got is a nice group of people that can be modeling what we learn and kind of planting seeds in the community. So we're good. We're real good. With that, I'm going to turn it over to John.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming. My name is John Abbey. I know most of you know that, but others may not. So we're going to be working tonight with something I like to call open-hearted communication. And there is quite a lot to it. So this is not something where you'll walk away at the end of the night and say, like, yes, I know open-hearted communication now. But you'll have gotten a taste of it. And I'll go over what seem to me like some of the most important points in it. It's something I've been studying and sharing for 13 years, something like that. Tons of workshops and so on. I'll have a handout with additional resources you can go to online, local organizations and so on. Yeah, and I call it open-hearted communication because part of what it's about is getting us, when we lose the place of compassion or understanding for each other, it's about getting us back to that place of like, okay, this person did some awful thing or said some awful thing, but I want to welcome them back into the community of humankind again. How do I get myself to do that? Because part of me is still really pissed at them or whatever. So for that part of it, a lot of it is about being open-hearted, being vulnerable, which can be really difficult when we're not feeling that trust, but when you're ready to take that risk, it is about listening in a way that helps you to have compassion for what's going on with the other person, and speaking in a way that is likely to inspire them to feel compassion for you, likewise. And I think that this might be valuable for us, because there might be some times in Occupy Eugene when things happen that aren't such great communication among people, and I think you have some idea about what that looks like.
Oh yeah, I can talk to that. I don't understand, Karen. Some things you did on Facebook.
What are you talking about? I didn't say anything about you on Facebook.
Well, I heard you did, and I read some stuff.
I did not say anything about you on Facebook. All I said was that you weren't doing your job. You're supposed to be staffing this building, and this building was not staffed on Thursday. I don't know what you're talking about, but you should have read the post.
And you didn't even sign up to staff here at all, and we're doing our best, and you never even show up.
My committee is doing stuff. I don't have time to just stand around and staff this building.
What committee are you?
I'm on the library committee. We do all kinds of important stuff.
Last I heard you talking about the spotted owl.
Our job,
So does any of this sound familiar? Does any of this sound like something that you've seen or that maybe you've participated in some way? Anybody? So just to give a little taste of what this can look like, I want anybody who wants, pick something in their interaction, pick any moment in their interaction, and when you want me to pretend to be that person suddenly going, oh, I want this to go better. What was something somebody said here that you'd like to be like, how do you respond to that in a good way?
What committee are you on?
What committee are you on? Okay, that's a great one. So instead of, I'm going to go with that, and then we'll try to look. Yeah. So what was the last thing she said before you said what committee are you on?
She asked me why I wasn't doing my job.
Why are you not doing your job? And you said, well, what committee are you on, right? Okay. So let's suppose at that moment, instead of saying, what committee are you on, inside Mary's head she goes, oh, we're doing it. We're having one of those communications that are not so great. What can I do that's different here? And I want to say in general, there's at least kind of two different directions you can go. One is, as I said, how do you listen compassionately to what the other person says? And the other is, how do you speak your own truth, but in a way that might be likely to inspire compassion in the other. So this process is not just about listening always to be the best listener and receive anything anybody's doing, but also can be about speaking strongly for what you want, but in a way that might be more likely than some of our habits for the other person to get it. So I'm guessing that what's going on for Mary when she hears, like, oh, you're not staffing, she's like, so, I feel really hurt. She's like insulting my commitment to occupy. Well, I'll show her. I'm going to strike back at her and tell her, like, well, what committee are you on? Right? She's not really asking the question because she's curious. Oh, what committee are you on, Karen? Right? It's a question, but it's not really a question. It's, you don't do enough. You don't do work either. How dare you criticize me? You don't do work either. But under that, I'm guessing it's more like, I feel hurt, And so that's kind of a first step. What you can do is just whatever reaction you're having to have compassion for yourself. And be like, this person said this thing. Before I open my mouth and jump back, what's going on for me? Okay, I feel hurt. I want to be seen that I care about this movement. I put a lot of time and energy into this movement. And if I wasn't staffing sometime when I signed up, it's because of some good reason. I'm trying to take care of myself. I had some other commitment that was important. Who knows what it was. And maybe it was something like that. So what she might choose to do is to express that. And this is the open-hearted part, to do it as vulnerably as possible, which, as I said, may not be easy. But if she can muster the presence and courage to do it, to say something like, Karen, I feel really hurt when you say that. It's really important to me to be seen that I really care about this movement. And I'm wondering if you can just tell me what you're hearing. So that little question at the end there is a way of helping to enroll the other person in this process of trying to get some compassion going again.
Could you repeat that question? I didn't.
So it was, Karen, I feel hurt, when I hear that. I want to be seen that I really care about this movement. I have a lot of commitment to it. And I'm wondering if you can just tell me what you're hearing right now. So just a simple reflection, because very often in the heat of the moment, people aren't getting the message you're sending, and it takes an explicit invitation to be like, she's opening her heart up to Karen, in the vulnerability instead of striking back. And one way to protect that vulnerability is to explicitly invite her, hey, can you just tell me what you're hearing? So that might be one thing that she, exposes her vulnerability and invites it back. Is there any questions about that? Or thoughts about that?
Well, yeah, when you say, like asking, can you tell me what you're hearing?
Mm-hmm.
That's again language I don't really relate to. So are you, in role-playing that, are you saying to invite the other person to tell you what they're hearing about you having just said that you're hurt when you heard them say that? Or the other thing might be, are you asking, can you tell me what you're hearing in the little squabble that happened before you said that?
I'm asking her to reflect what I said just now. So I feel hurt, and I want to be seen that I'm really committed to OE. And that matters a lot to me. Can you just tell me what you're hearing, right, that I just said? Any other questions or thoughts on that?
Another way to say it maybe would be, can you validate that for me?
Yeah, that's even asking a little more, which might be a perfectly fine thing to do. Not just can you tell me what you heard, but do you get that? Does that make sense to you? Do you, or even do you get that that's true that I'm really committed to it? And I'm guessing her response might be then like, she probably didn't really mean, the anger that direction, but she was. What did the fight start with?
I wasn't here when she thought I should be.
That was the initial.
I think so.
Well, the initial thing was Facebook.
Oh, Facebook.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
right.
heard you were
Right.
you were talking about me.
Right. So you
talking about me, Facebook.
Right.
Yes.
But yeah, you can ask either for literally just for somebody to reflect back what they heard, or like you said, kind of a validation that do they get you've exposed this vulnerable thing. Hey, I really care about OE, and it really matters to me to be seen and to have that acknowledged, and explicitly ask for that. do you see that I'm committed to it? Yeah. So, and her response might be, yeah, I get that, you know, so why are you yelling at me for what I did on Facebook? Which might be a really understandable, you know, return. And then that would be an opportunity for Mary, instead of expressing, you know, her upset, maybe that would be her chance to then try and tune into what was really going on for Karen. Like, oh, you know, was that hard to hear when I said that? Like, you know, do you want to be accepted that you're kind of always trying to do something good, even if later it turns out it wasn't, you know, whatever. Guessing at, you know, why she might have done it or what her hurt, you know, was. Because really it was the same thing the other way around. If it started with you attacking her for being on Facebook, then her accusing you of not staffing was her being angry, you know, in response to cover her hurt for what you said about her, you know, what she did on Facebook.
So admitting the vulnerability of, well, that really hurt me when you said that because I'm really committed and I try and do a lot here.
Right.
That also invites her to come from her heart and saying, well, you know, when you said what you said about Facebook, that really hurt me too, because I'm trying to do a lot for this movement too. And it gets us to the place of finding common ground.
But even if she isn't, so one side of the process is for you to be vulnerable about, you know, what's going on for you. Suppose she doesn't, you know, soften up that and she does what I said and just goes, yeah, no, I get that you care, but then why are you attacking me, you know, for what I did? You know, I've apologized and da-da-da. And so that in a way is a cry for her to be heard, you know, and you could say something that lets her know that you get, you know, why she was hurt, you know, when you said that. You know, yeah, you know, you might even, if you felt bad about it, say, you know, yeah, no, I feel bad that I said that. I'm guessing that was hard to hear, and you want to be seen that, you know, you are always, you know, trying to do your best. You know, something like that. And that guess might be right, and she'll probably go, yeah, or not. And if it's not, then she'll say something else that'll let you know what it's really about. And that's an important part of this thing. If you are kind of guessing what's going on with somebody else, the important thing isn't whether you're right or wrong. The important thing is that you let them know you care. You care about what, you know, was behind their reaction or what they said or what they did. And if you didn't get it right, they might get more upset in the moment, but they'll probably also say more that'll give you more clue about, you know, what their vulnerable piece in the situation was. So you had another thing you wanted to?
No, I just missed your cue. I thought you were looking for like another thing that was said that was taken the wrong way.
Sure.
The question, what do you mean? Because I think it could have been a good question, but the way it was said, it sounded like it really didn't mean what it said. You know, what do you mean?
What was it in response to?
About the committee, I think the library committee.
Oh, right. She said, I'm on the library committee. Oh, what do you mean I'm on the library committee?
Yeah.
Right.
But that's very much like the previous example.
It's similar, right. I think often we ask questions that sound like we're asking for information, we're curious, but actually it's just, we do it in a tone that makes it clear we're really just expressing upset or something. And when that is there, you're often better off not answering the question, but instead reading what the upset was and trying to check with them, oh, is this what you're upset about? So when she says, what do you mean? You know, Mary, if she wanted to guess what was going on for Karen, might say something like, oh, I'm guessing you feel hurt when you hear me question, you know, you're being on a committee. You want, you know, me to get that you know, really care about OE and you do stuff that matters here.
To piss the other person off.
Uh-huh.
So when somebody's trying to piss you off,
yeah,
how do you put that aside and act in a different way?
Yeah. So when she says, "What do you mean? I'm on, you know, library committee." So you know, Mary inside is boiling, right? But if she wants to stop and try to do something else, and be like, you know, I'm so frustrated, you know, that she's not, you know, respecting the work that I do, and that so you give yourself, you know, some empathy, some compassion, and you know that it can be hard to do enough of that in the moment to calm yourself down. Maybe the best you can do in the moment is to say, is to say, and I want to say more, but I'm not sure I can do it. So another option is to just go, look, I'm all hot and angry now, and I actually just want to take a break and maybe come back and talk about this later, because I don't want this to be a bad thing between us. And then you can go off and have some time to talk with your friend and get some understanding from them. Hopefully somebody who isn't going to join you in demonizing the other person, right? Sometimes we go for help from other people and we're like, what so-and-so did is awful, and they join, yeah, that is awful. But don't get that kind of support. Talk to somebody who respects, and has understanding for the other person, and tell them, I want to bitch and moan about this person, and I want you to validate, my feelings about it, but not in a way that's about making either the other person wrong or bad.
So you can make some real clear requests of the friend you go to speak with about it.
Yeah.
That, I don't want somebody to join me in bullying up on them. I'm trying to figure out how to re-engage them in a good conversation, and so if you could just hear feedback on that rather than jump on the bandwagon of making them out to be real bad, because I'm already there, I don't need help with that, thank you very much.
Right, and what you want is just enough understanding for yourself to make the shift that John is asking about. How do you go from being angry to actually wanting to connect with human again? And like I said, once you've gotten enough of that, again, you can come back either with, look, there was something I wanted to say and I don't think I said it well, let me try again. And then you offer it in this vulnerable way, and then check if they are understanding or if they're even, validating it. Or you can come and be like, I probably wasn't listening as well as I would have liked in our last interaction. Let me see if I, am understanding kind of where you were coming from. And then make your guess about, the vulnerable thing that might have been going on behind what they were saying or doing.
When Max Renault was here, I was continually struck by what an incredible listener he was. Over and over again, he'd respond to someone and I think, well, I heard them say that, but I didn't hear them say that the way Max did. And, really being able to step outside yourself and listen to the other person.
But it's not always easy, and
no.
That's why I think John's question was really good. So it's like, when you're not stepped outside of yourself, what does it take, And sometimes for me, just a second of like, okay, I really do care about making this good. Sometimes that's enough, and I shift. Sometimes it's not. So then the option of taking a break is a good one. So do we want to is there another?
Sure. Because I'm really angry at Art right now.
Why?
Art, why did you move the library committees to Thursday? I'm on the library committee. You didn't even ask me. Why?
What's the deal? You haven't been there for a freaking month.
But I've been really busy, and it's like I've been on the library committee for months now, and I just don't get it. Like, why wouldn't you even ask me? Thursdays don't work for me.
What have you been busy with? Some flaky New Age listening workshop or something?
Yes. This stuff isn't.
Wait, what do you mean? What do you mean flaky New Age listening workshop? What? You have no respect for this? Why are you even here?
I just call them like I see them.
So what's flaky about this?
I'm just listening. It's like feelings and stuff like that. And who needs that? I mean, I'm from the Midwest. We're into that touchy feeling.
Okay. So
This
again,
may never be healed.
so what's a moment in that you'd like to see how somebody might have gone differently?
Well, I guess I picked common themes of asking questions that aren't questions.
That's a good one. Were you thinking of something in particular in that?
No, starting off, why did you do that? Not really a question.
Well, right. And yet, again, the two opportunities are there. So he could not take it as a serious question and just be like, are you really frustrated because it really matters to you to take part in this? Something like that. Mm-hmm. Or he could take it as a question, and there'd be an opportunity for him to vulnerably say, well, actually, I've been meaning to talk with you about it, but I haven't been able to, locate you. So, I felt really frustrated, but we needed to move forward, and I kind of didn't know what else to do. And again, I especially when things are really hot, I really encourage you not to just leave it hanging like that. If you don't ask a question to get something back, there's more opportunity for somebody to misunderstand even your genuine attempt to connect, as some, sideways attack or whatever, and then respond, in the same vein. But I think when you ask those questions, it's an unusual thing to do. As Jessica said, it's not in most of our habits to do it. It can kind of shake people out of like, what? Like, why is somebody asking me to repeat what they just said? How goofy is that? And yet, I'm guessing all of you have had some experience with communication problems where it turned out it was just somebody not having gotten what somebody else said. So it can be really helpful. Yep.
Well, at the end, it changed the whole dynamics when all of a sudden there were 3 people involved in this, that you reacted to his remark. And so what do you...
Then it's a question of you just have to pick which thing to go with, and you can't do it all at once. You pick one thing and you work on that. Hand out something that would be helpful. One thing that can be challenging in this sometimes is like, how do you sometimes it's like, what does it even mean to say what's the vulnerable thing in somebody about something? So I want to offer something that can be helpful inquiry in that. And process something called needs or values. And not needs in the sense of like, oh, I have to have this, you have to give this to me or else. Needs more in the sense of just things that are really, really, really important to us. So I have a whole list I could hand out, but I'm actually just going to ask us to brainstorm some. Needs are things that are always positive. Positive in the sense that, wow, if I knew that that was what was going on for that person, that was what they were wanting behind what they were doing or saying, wow, and then I would kind of understand like where they were coming from. I still might disagree with what they did, but it is something positive. And also something abstract in the sense that it's not connected to any particular person, place, or thing. So Karen's need, would not be to have Art check with her before changing the time for the library committee. It would be something kind of behind that, because that's attached. That's a particular real-world thing.
It's maybe internal rather than external.
Yes, right. Positive, abstract, internal. And there are also things that are universal. I believe we all share the same needs. And that's part of what makes them helpful to get in touch with, to establish some compassion, because whatever somebody's need is, it's a need that you have sometimes as well. So what, with these things in mind, just what do you think of as, what are some of our needs and values in that sense?
She was looking for inclusion and decisions.
Sure. What else?
Validation.
This pen is pretty close to dead. Wait, include. Inclusion.
Respect.
Validation. Respect. What else? What are the things we all need every day, or some days at least?
Maybe some support or encouragement.
Support. Yeah. How about I would say fun?
Fun?
Yeah.
Fun?
Wow.
As evidenced by the laughter right now.
Status.
What?
Status.
Status. So that's That's interesting. That is abstract. I think I will go ahead and write it down, but part of me is like, and I guess part of how I would think of it is this. If I think the reason somebody did something was status, sometimes that I might go, oh, okay, I get that. But other times I might go like, I don't care if they want status. That, like, what is this, some kind of hierarchical thing, you know? So, but why do people want status? What's behind that?
They want to feel worthwhile.
Respect could be, yeah.
Recognition.
Recognition.
Worthiness.
Worthiness. Yeah, right. Worth. I would even say power, maybe.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess that's another one that, you know, depending on the context, I might or might not be moved by that, you know. But I mean, sometimes the context is realizing somebody wants some power in a situation, some freedom, some, you know, latitude, some choice in a situation. When I think of it that way, then I'm, you know, probably going to feel positive about it. And so what just happened there with status, you know, I think is an important thing to keep in mind. The point of inquiring into what the need is not to get some word on a list. It's not an intellectual exercise to be like, oh, I got to that thing. The point is to get to a point where inside you've experienced that shift that John was asking after, where you go from like, they did this thing or they said this thing, to like, okay, I get why they said that or why they did that. I can see them as human again. So even if you get to something that's on the list, if you don't have that internal experience, then keep going. Ask yourself, well, why do they want that? Why do they want the status? Until you find the deeper thing that does make you kind of go through that shift.
And then if you're guessing about someone else's needs, you need to confirm that with them to make sure that your assumption is correct, because
you don't know.
You don't know.
Yeah.
It may be something totally different, but it could be that I will come back and say, well, Karen, you know, did you? I hear that you really wanted to be included in that decision, that was important to you, and it just validates that he understands her need.
Well, and that's another place where it's going to help to say, is that right?
Is that
Did I
right?
get that right?
Yep.
Because if you don't say that and you're wrong, you might start a whole new thing. Like, no, what makes you think you know me and what matters to me? No.
Wait, does that sound familiar?
What?
Does that sound familiar?
So yeah, checking
So you
in.
need to ask when you're making the assumptions.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, and when you're not with them, it may not matter so much that you weren't right. You've had the shift, and now you're like, oh, okay. You know, but then you go and ask them, and they go, no, that's not it. But then they'll say something else. It was blah 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 blah. That might give you some clue into what it was, what it really was. You know, and then you'll both have the shift and have understood what it really was. So, any other need?
Safety.
I'm going to cheat and look at the list. Oh, yeah. Celebration. Did you ever have somebody stop you when you were celebrating something or come down on you? This is the chance.
About learning.
Learning.
Learning, the process of learning.
Uh-huh.
Acknowledgement.
Being understood, being heard.
Uh-huh.
Acceptance.
Uh-huh.
What was that like? Acceptance.
Acceptance?
Contribution.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I think that is an immense one. And in a way, that was what the very first thing that we looked at. In a way, that's what it was about, or what I was guessing it was about. You know, that Mary wanted to be seen and be heard about that she did contribute. You know, but it was she felt insulted as if she was being told she wasn't contributing when she was, which is about how important it is to us to contribute. And I really believe that we all have just this huge, incredible desire to give, I mean, that goes to, economic analysis, right? We build one kind of economic system when we think everybody's a greedy bastard who just wants to take, and we build a completely different economic system if we assume that everybody has, this powerful need to contribute. Then it's just a question of unleashing that force instead of somehow pushing our greediness into something that will be to the common good. And that relates to another piece of this. So there might come a point in the, well, even the kind of questions that I was asking. When you ask one of these questions, like, can you tell me what you heard, or do you, does that make sense to you? Can you validate that? There's two ways we can make ask questions of each other. Anything from as simple a one as can you reflect what you're hearing, to will you drive me to that protest in California? And we can either be attached to the outcome, the person better damn well say yes and do what we're asking, or we can be open. It can be a genuine request. And the question is less about will they do it or not? Am I going to get what I want? And it's more about genuinely wanting to know, would they like to do this or not? Anytime we ask something of somebody, we're offering them a chance to contribute. But if they do it just out of debt or obligation or something like that, we'll probably pay for it later. Right? Anybody ever done something they didn't really want to do? Yeah. So how did that feel later? Did you feel like they owed you something maybe, or?
I don't know. I hear people putting down other people, and that bothers me a lot. And they just get dished to the side. Oh, they're stupid or whatever. And I don't know. I guess I need to learn how to communicate that better.
How to what?
Communicate, but I don't like that kind of talk. It bothers me. Yeah.
And does it bother you because you care?
Yeah, because I want everybody to get along, and I do want to value what people say, and I don't want them just to be dished aside like they're an idiot or whatever.
Yeah. And that's a really important, another need that I see. Caring about each other. I think a lot of what we do or want to do comes out of that caring for each other, and that can be a really vulnerable one. So that can be one that takes a lot of courage to be open about, because we kind of are, our cultural story is that everybody's kind of a greedy bastard, and it's kind of to be cool and, oh yeah.
So she goes to an interesting place. What we've talked about so far is pretty much when I'm having a conversation with one other person or two other people, but what she's saying is when I observe all other people doing this fighting stuff, how it makes her feel. And so there's also the responsibility that we all have as community members of Occupy Eugene, that when that kind of thing's going on and you see an observation of something happening, to be able to share that, when you guys get it, talk to each other the way you are now, that for me it really, it hurts me. It makes me feel sad because I want to all be on this, on the same path together. And so to be able to step up as individuals when communication is going badly, even if you're not involved in that communication, and kind of protect your sense of community and wanting to care for other people by putting yourself in the spot of, hey, can we figure out how to communicate that a little better? Because when I hear it done that way, it really just, it makes me sad. And I experience that on a fairly regular basis here.
So I guess I started thinking about that as Mary started talking, and I was like, yeah, how do you, when you see two people disrespecting each other, how do you step in between that and say, like, you guys aren't really talking to each other with respect? And I was kind of thinking, well, like, do you say, like, how do you think that makes that person feel? And I was kind of contemplating that. Then I thought that's an interesting to say, like, when I see this way that you guys are communicating, it hurts me. Like, I'm not feeling good about the way that you guys are communicating, and then it's about you and not them. I mean, that's the right.
Yeah. No, I think often what we do in those situations is we get annoyed, and then we act our annoyance out at them. and we make it worse instead of better. What's wrong with you guys? Why are you fighting? Oh God, I wish you'd stop. Is that, that's not going to go well. So the alternative is to do, I'll go around the question, but I just quickly want to say, she started to point to a different way, which, as you said, is again the vulnerability. You say, I feel scared, or concerned, or sad, when I see that. And then the trick is what to ask. So if you just leave it hanging there, again, it may not go anywhere. But we'll come back to that.
Well, kind of following up what Helen's saying, I'm thinking about different cultures of communication. When we were at the quad for a little bit one day at Big John, saw these two students, and they were like going at each other's throats on some kind of like abstract political tangent. He kept like edging closer because he was expecting to have to break up a fight. And then the guy looks at his watch, like, oh, I gotta get to class, so I'll see you back at the house to grab the beer tonight. And the guy's like, yeah. And I think about like people from the East Coast, or like all kinds of these different things that, where, you take two people from the East Coast and fly them in Eugene, and they fend the hell out of a bunch of people, but I don't really blame that on the East Coast mentality. So I think that there's a complex situation, especially in something like OE, where we are bringing in, I think about like the way a lot of street kids communicate, depending on a lot of people at the camp, and all these different complex cultures of communication. I really hear what Helen's saying around, like, you gotta watch your own self. It's easy to say, oh, you guys are being disrespectful because it's making me anxious or agitated to see that kind of communication.
Yeah, well, I think that's why it can be really helpful, exactly what she said, to talk about herself and not you're being disrespectful and you are doing it wrong. Now, you often do want to be specific about what it is that's stimulating, the experience that you're having. So when you guys are talking like this, but not making a judgment about it, but trying to be as precise as possible about what you actually saw. That's another piece of this.
There's a big piece, actually, observation without evaluation.
We'll go into it more, but I just want to, in a little while, but I just want to bookmark it for now. That can be one way to help, to avoid running into trouble.
So one reaction also when you see that kind of conversation is might make you afraid that we're actually not going to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. Mm-hmm. So I would suggest that maybe a need is pulled.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Also, in what John brought up in response to Helen, I guess that says that if you're reading in a conversation, not just say how you're feeling about that conversation, but also checking in to make sure there really is a fight. That maybe that was just your misunderstanding.
Yeah. Because she's like, hey, I feel concerned, hearing your raised voice and stuff. I just want to check. Are you all cool with each other? And like these guys would have been like, oh yeah, we're fine. And that would have been short as that.
But the one we talked to, he did blah blah blah.
Right.
Versus if on the other hand you see two people going at it and you jump in and right away start saying, damn it, you guys can never talk civilly and what's wrong with you and blah blah blah. All of a sudden you instead of clearly saying an observation of, when you guys talk with raised voices, I'm concerned and what's going on here? Are you really upset with each other? What can we do? If you confuse that observation with evaluation that it's a terrible thing going on right now, and maybe it's not such a terrible thing going on right now, it just interferes with communication so much. I mean, it's the thing about it, the observation's a big piece of it for me, being able to do that without making assumptions about what's going on, by asking questions, and not like I asked you.
Something I've noticed as a key speaker that if two people are going at it and you kind of approach it, no matter sometimes how you approach it, they're immediate like, well, this is none of your business. Mm-hmm. No, but it is my business because you're disrupting everyone's peace. You're making everyone feel badly about this. But
so let's say you're in a fight with Andy, and I say something like, oh, excuse me, even that much might be enough, right?
Hey, this is none of your business. What are you doing butting in here?
Okay, so in my head I might go, this damn well is my business. Like, the way we all interact, like, really affects each other. If there's a schism between them, it's going to affect this whole committee, blah, 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 blah. But anybody think it's going to go well if I say, this is to my business? That's probably not going to help. So again, that's an opportunity to be like, how can I do it differently in that moment? So I can go in my own head, damn, who is my business? This stuff, you know, is what makes things not fun around here. Okay, but I've stepped in the middle of something and he thinks I shouldn't be there. So, you know, do I want to express myself or do I want to listen? Well, he seems kind of hot and bothered, and I'm a little more centered now, so let me see if I can try and listen. So I'm not going to try and listen to the last thing he said in the fight. I'm going to listen to the very last thing he said. That's often a very helpful thing. People will go on and on and on. If you don't know what piece of something to respond to, pick the last thing. That's what's on their mind. It's what they just said. So he's basically saying, butt out. It's like, so are you like wanting respect that you can work this out yourselves?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I can get that, and you know, I was really concerned because you know when fights get bad between people, it really affects everybody. Do you know what I mean?
Sure. But I still think you're funny.
Yeah. All right. Thanks.
I want to add to that.
Yeah.
I haven't seen you around here. Why would you butt in? I don't even know who you are.
Yeah, I feel like I have to have the answer right away, and this stuff is hard to have the answer right sometimes. But, so, I mean, is it hard for you to trust that somebody, you know, who hasn't been involved, you know, might be able to help?
Well, I just feel like I've seen that, and I feel like it's been directed my way sometimes. Like, you know, when I try to ask a question about something, it's like, well, I haven't really seen you.
Oh, sorry, I was jumping into the role play with you.
Oh, were you?
So, yeah. So you're like, you haven't seen me, you're saying you haven't seen me around. So yeah, is it hard to, you know, is it hard to trust that somebody, you know, who you haven't seen might be able to help?
Yeah, I don't know who you are. I mean, you could be like a cop or somebody just trying to like mess stuff up here. You know, I don't know if you're trying to walk in here and trying to change things around. We've got something going on here.
So you're kind of wanting some respect and understanding for what the process has been among the people who have been involved?
Yeah.
I care. I came down here because you all are doing this great work, and I'm inspired and want to join in some way. So
well, I appreciate you coming down.
You can see it kind of shifts things a little bit.
You think it'd be legitimate when you see interaction going sour to suggest that the people feed back to each other?
It might be. So, I mean, suppose it comes back to like, you know, actually we are kind of having a bit of a fight, and, you know, if you have any advice or whatever, you know, then I might offer that, or even proactively, if they are kind of, if I have managed to work my way in to help at all. Yeah, this is jumping ahead to sort of, basically what you can do is sort of, so when you first jump in, people are going to be having these reactions, and you need to be able to just listen and be present to them, the way I was trying to model. If you jump first into what they ought to do to be better, they're probably going to hear it as judgment, you know, and so on. And if that happens, then again, you know, hey, why are you telling us how to talk to each other? Oh, so you wanting more respect, or but if it seems like, you know, they're kind of letting you into that mediated role, yeah, then that may be exactly something you would do. And often what's helpful is to, you know, so if Ben is saying something and Anne just seems, you know, not getting it all, then, you know, or responding back, I could say, I could jump in when he says something and be like, oh, so is what you're saying, you know, that you want to do the action this way? Do you think it would be more effective? And he goes, oh, yeah, that's it. Okay, so then, and what I'm hearing him say is he wants to do it that way because he thinks it would be more effective.
What I was really referring to is to suggest that they feed back to each other. Because, like, if you observe two people talking and they're not communicating. I mean, as an outsider, you might say, you guys are not talking. Why don't you try feeding back to each other? I know it's kind of a stretch. But.
No. I mean, I think that's another way. There's another way to do it. So if things are hot between people, sometimes it's helpful for you to do the guessing. And they say what's going on. You guess what's going. What if it's about this? Effectiveness, or hope, whatever. They say, yeah, that's it. And then you say to the other person, so I'm hearing that what they're wanting is this. So they've heard it 2 or 3 times, and then they might be more likely to get it. But if another way thing is to just invite them directly to do it. So he says that whatever the thing is, and then you go, so I've noticed that you're each kind of responding to each other directly, and I just want to invite you another way, if you want to try, is to reflect back what you're hearing the other person say. But I think again it can be so easy for people to take that in a bad way. I think again that's a good place to offer, is that something you'd like to try? Like to end with a question that makes it clear you're offering it with an open hand. You're not trying to push it down this road. Yeah.
Well, I think kind of going back to Benjamin's original example, I found a lot of times just witnessing itself would often de-escalate real quick. Just having a third observer there would kind of simultaneously validate that there was a world beyond what was going on, and I think kind of frankly make people realize how ridiculous they're acting. Because it was this weird switch you'd see in people sometimes where they go from really caught up in a moment, heated, and then be like, oh yeah, sorry dude, and then walk off, And it just seemed like the pure process of observation and the fact that you're willing to observe and that you're not judging, you're not even trying to act as if you think there's something wrong, but I'm just here to watch.
Yeah.
That alone would work so many times.
That's, to me, what you're speaking to is empathy. And that's when you said there's no judgment, and what have you. And because we communicate so much with words, we're talking a lot about words, in all this process. And one way to have empathy is to make a guess at what somebody's needs are. But the empathy is not in the words. The empathy is in the attitude you have, that lets you come up with a guess of what might be going on for them. And just that attitude, without any words, whether you're in a conflict or observing a conflict, like you say, I think can do a lot to support people to coming back to that wanting to understand each other.
Also, leads to safety.
What?
It leads to safety. It helps with safety. If there's somebody, especially if it's a one-directional, if there's one person yelling at the other, then if you walk up, then suddenly the person who's receiving that feels like, oh, there's a witness. I'm at least safe to some extent. This person is going to have to moderate their behavior because they're not going to be, they're not going to hit me, or they're not going to say something that's really out of line because someone's paying attention.
All these things seem to work really well if their people are at a reasonable level still. One of the things that seem to be most helpful with a camper in any situation where people are really way beyond reasonable is when they say, who do you think you are, or anything, is a distraction. Oh, I'm John Abbey, and you really just pull the conversation somewhere totally else. Because I see people, particularly here at Occupy, just so electrochemically involved in their conversations that I don't think frequently these subtle, oh, I care about you kind of things work as the first cut, that maybe they work as the third thing, like if you can distract them and let them get their heart rates down and some things like that, then you get to the point where you can have the empathy and the, this.
Well, I think it helps to have the empathy from the beginning. You can have the empathy and try to express it, explicitly by guessing a need. You can also have empathy when you're doing the distraction. If you're doing the distraction just because you're freaked out and you're trying to get them away from that thing, they might pick up on that and be like, "Hey, you're trying to pull me away from what, where I really am," right? But if you're doing it with as much empathy and love as you can, but you're just like, I'm gonna invite them out of that box altogether, I think it's probably more likely to go well. But yeah, there's a lot of strategies to try and help in the situation. I mean, with distraction, the risk is that we never go back and actually connect with what was going on. And sometimes somebody was worked up about something in the moment, and later it's not a big deal. It doesn't matter. But sometimes it is some simmering thing that's just going to keep simmering now because it hasn't actually been resolved.
Yeah, I agree with that with Jean. I was a foster parent for 5 years with developmentally disabled boys. And like she said, sometimes we're not really dealing with reasonable people. And that active distraction really, really works sometimes to be able to just change their way of thinking. And you can sort of de-escalate it a little bit and then use those.
Yeah, I've heard a great story about a woman who was asleep at night and suddenly realized there was somebody who had just broken in through her window. And, at first she was scared, but she somehow knew not to respond like, ah. But instead she was just like, what time is it? This guy was like, it's 2 a.m. Like, oh, wow, I was, worried that I'd slept all the way past work, and somehow she just got him into a conversation, and, ended up hearing, the difficulties he was having. She let him stay on her couch downstairs, and then, saw him off in the morning. And it's, just taking him out of the context he was in, defused.
I wonder if an awful lot of time the fight that's going on has absolutely nothing to do with the fight that's going on.
Yeah. I think that's often true, but I caution us to be too analytical. I'm going to figure out what's really going on.
No, I just mean that by addressing what's going on, you're not getting at the issue at all. Really what's going on is somebody's pissed generally at the world. That's what I see tons of here. And they're just going to pick a fight with whoever walks around about whatever happens to be happening.
So if you get the sense that is that then you can guess at, then you
where do you go then?
You go, are you really upset? Like, has the world really kind of screwed you over? Yeah, man, all my life I've been, dealing with, this and that and the other thing and, blah, blah, blah. It's like, that sounds, really hard. Like, I'm guessing you'd like to have kind of more support from the world. Yeah. So, I mean, it's you can make the guesses that do take it away from the thing in the moment. If you think, and their response will tell you whether you, because they could say, what the hell are you talking about? No, this guy stole my book and I want it back. So now we're going to talk about something that really pisses Art off. We're going to talk about feeling. So this is a list of...
Can we all sing it?
This is a list of needs going around this way. So not everything on here might be on there, but like I said, it doesn't matter so much what the list is. And this page has on it, on one side, a list of the feelings that we have when our needs are being met. And on the other side, a list of the feelings we often have when our needs are not being met.
It does say you're not empathetic.
Right.
I don't think as a very empathetic person, but I would like to be more empathetic. How do you get to empathy?
Can you give me an example?
Well, when you were just giving the previous example, I don't want to hear this guy's story. I've heard so many stories. I just want, leave me alone. Go talk to somebody else. And that's probably not a very empathetic
No, it's
way
not.
To feel.
But the beauty of this is there's always somebody you can be empathetic to. And if you can't be empathetic to the other person, you can be empathetic to yourself.
Okay.
So you can go like, so what might be her need in that moment? This guy's talking her ear off. She doesn't really want to be there.
I said peace.
Peace, sure, which is another one we can even have down here. But yeah, peace. Is that maybe what it is?
Yeah.
So inside yourself, you can be like, why is this guy going on? I don't want to talk to him. Okay, I don't want to just blabber that out at him. Not that much presence. And you go, well, what's going on for me? Like, I'm really frustrated. I just want some peace. I just want to be able to relax. I don't want to deal with this. So then from that place, that might, move you enough to go like, I have peace, but this guy's troubled. Maybe I do want to check in with what's going on for him. Or you might not. You might be like, I don't want to. I want to take care of myself right now. So then you could even, as I said, you always have the option of listening or of expressing yourself. You could express yourself, but maybe with a little more empathy than you might have done otherwise, or a little more invitation to empathy than you might have done otherwise. You can say, I see you've got a lot going on, but I've been pretty crazy myself, and I really just need to go home and chill out. So I'm going to go. Do you get what I'm saying? Do you get that?
Yeah.
Well, often, especially since moving to Eugene, I found myself the target of one-sided conversations where people just yammer on and don't pause. And I've discovered that it doesn't really matter whether you're listening to them or not. So I just sort of let my mind go blank and I just go every 45 seconds. And I found that actually works. And after a while, they're done. And they go along. And it's actually kind of draining on my part, but this person needs to be talking to a human being, although as nearly as I can tell, they could just as well be talking to a post. But that's
so two things I want to say to that. One is that the guy who developed this, Marshall Rosenberg, he's discovered that there's a place that people like that can go. On and on anonymous. So the thing I really want to say though is I know that experience absolutely. And I think most people who do that a lot are used to nobody listening to them, ever.
right.
And they might run out of juice after half an hour or 45 minutes, and you may never have the sense that you're being there, really mattered.
Yeah.
But I think it does. I think if we're really present and if we give them the time, even if we're not listening, maybe, but maybe more so if we really are, it can make a difference over time. There is a wonderful story by a woman named Brenda Euland. She's most famous for writing a book about writing. She never became a super famous writer herself, but she wrote for a paper in Minnesota for a long time. She was in Greenwich Village in the 30s or whatever. That was the cool place to be. And but she wrote this one article that just blows me away called "Tell Me More." And if anybody wants it, I'll send it out on contacts. It's just, or maybe I'll send it before the one on listening, because it's really just about that. And she had a friend of the family or whatever, this guy, a friend of hers, who had just retired, and he was, sort of a classic mid-20th century guy doing the breadwinning and so on. And he retired and realized he didn't really have a relationship with his family or his wife or his kids because he had been out, earning the bread. And he was just kind of lost. And she described her interaction with him, and at first it just felt like that. He was just always kind of going on, and it didn't seem to matter that she was there. She spent a whole weekend with him, listening to him, and he was sharing, some of the things they said, and other things. And she writes about this in the article, she just tried to treat it as if every single thing he was saying was the most fascinating, interesting thing in the world. And you can try to just fake that, but I think this kind of stuff makes it easier to actually be doing that, because anytime people are saying something, it's because there's something that matters to them about it. So if your attention is there. Anyway, so for the weekend, she did this, and she said at the end of the weekend, there was a moment where he finally turned to her and was like, "How are you?" And it's like, all of a sudden, after being heard, he naturally finally turned of his own regard and realized, oh, there's another person here, and let me check in with them and see how they are. And I can only imagine, like I said, I've had that experience and not had it go to that, and it can be draining and whatever. But I've also had the experience of listening to somebody who had a lot to say, and then having them eventually kind of do that turnaround, and it just feels so good. Because I feel seen in my having been there, for them and listened to them. Wow. And I know how much they had going on, and the fact that they now actually have some attention for me is like, wow.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of exaggerating. I don't completely tune into it. Check out every minute or two to see what's going on.
Well, attention is love. And so if someone's getting attention, they're feeling love, and then they will extend that to you back. So that's another need is for attention.
And love.
And that's probably why people are arguing, is because they don't feel that they're getting attention.
Well, and I think usually what happens is both people think, you know, the other person is responsible for them not having, you know, enough love or attention. And there's a collision of needs, and both people are so worked up they're not able to be there for the other person. And that's why the first step so often is to have empathy for yourself in the moment, or to take a time out and go get some empathy for yourself to help you get to the point of, okay, I'm centered enough now that I actually am curious what was going on for that.
And you can't really fake good attention. You can't just go, oh yeah, yeah, You really got to be after that person. And when you are, it really cuts short the communication. It doesn't take forever and ever and ever, because they do feel seen and heard and acknowledged.
Well, it could take a weekend. It could take a weekend with somebody who's been culturally, trained, in a direction where they are just supposed to be go, 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 and not, it's.
Well, weekends are small time compared to a life.
Exactly. Yes, and it helps me to be aware these are not. None of these things are just, oh, this person has a problem. All of our difficulty doing this kind of stuff is culture. It is the dominations, how the domination system trains us. We're trained to be alienated from each other because that is what will keep us, from making the revolution.
Well, may I make one more statement then?
Please.
The domination model. Okay. I had my hand up. I don't know if this is like a meeting where you acknowledge people who have their hands up. Is this not like that?
I've been doing that, yes. I did.
Yeah, well, I had my hand
Sorry.
up. You acknowledged that I had my hand up, but this guy had his hand up. And you went to him, then you went to him, then you went to him.
Oh,
so
I'm sorry.
I want to say, I don't know if this is like a sexist thing or what, but I've never experienced just being completely shined on like that. So thank you. That's all.
You're welcome. I feel a little flushed, so a little embarrassed, and actually kind of mortified.
Well, you probably have a picture of yourself as not like that.
Yeah, so I'm like, oh my God, I did something that led to somebody feeling, having the idea they were shined on or ignored. Because it matters to me, to include everybody. Really
well, it seemed like it was very masculine kind of thing. Everybody was a guy who was speaking, So I don't know. I'm not real feminist or anything, but it kind of just appeared that way to me. That was my observation. So thank you. So am I just supposed to speak up, or am I supposed to raise my hand?
Please do just speak up. Just to be clear about the way I was thinking about that, I've never been trying to take a stack tonight. A bunch of hands went up.
Okay. Well, I think that if there are other people here who are like me, they're a little more shy and they're not going to just speak up. I think that you guys all know each other a little more than I know you. And so, if somebody, they would know that who's here and that they're safe and all that, I don't know that, but I am shy in one way and then I'm like a real gutsy kind of person in another way, so I did bring it up. But there might be other people here who would not speak up, and if they raise their hand, it might be good to not take a stack, but acknowledge, that you had something to say or something like that. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you. And I think it's really important. This, especially to the question of new people coming into the group. I think a bunch of us have been involved together long enough. There's like a kind of, we all know each other, families, whatever. And I think there's a strength in that, but there's also a risk in that people who are new won't, feel as welcomed or invited. So I think it is important for us to give extra attention to make sure everybody's included.
And I do think it might make some sense to take a stack in a group this size, only because I know that there are some people here that are hesitant to just jump in and get the word in, and I know that there are some others that are very comfortable doing that. Mm-hmm. And so it might make some sense to do some stacks if you see a bunch of hands go up.
All right, I will do that if I see hands go up.
I think, as an observation, I think you modeled when you first spoke with her a very important thing. That, she said something that really embarrassed you or made you feel emotions and negatively or something, and instead of lashing back at her or not saying anything, you really expressed how you felt back to her. And, I think that really made a difference. Even as, myself as an observer, it made me feel so much more comfortable that you even thanked her for saying that.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I want the feedback to be able to live my values better. So if I can get past the first, hey, no, I do have those values. Okay, wow, no, she's actually giving me helpful feedback for it. And I want to speak to kind of one thing you said in there about her making me feel bad. In my way of thinking in this, actually nobody else can make me feel anything. So she said those words, and then I had this feeling. But I had this feeling because I was realizing my need to be inclusive, wasn't being met. But it was, me who did it. She said something that alerted me to it, but it's my need that was not met that led to my feeling. That's you can argue about what the cause of my feeling actually was, but that's the piece of what caused my feeling that I have control over, that I can own, and that I have the opportunity to be vulnerable about. And that relates, then to the feelings, sheets that just went around. Sometimes when you're having a hard time being like, what does this person need? I have no clue. One thing that can be very helpful is to first make a guess at, well, what's their feeling? And actually, that says feelings on it. I think it's often helpful to try to use the word emotions instead of feelings, because when we talk about feelings, we can say things like, well, I feel like you're an idiot.
Right.
I feel like you shouldn't have done that. Right. And basically, anytime you say, I feel, and then anything other than an emotion word, you're probably actually expressing a thought. But you're just putting the word feel in front of it. But if you think about what somebody's emotion was, or what your emotion was, that's really going to get you at the words on the page. And some of them, when you realize that's what somebody's feeling, are going to give you a good clue as to what the need is. Is anybody looking at the sheet? Think of an example of that.
What do you want an example?
Just pick a feeling off the list. Any feeling?
Peaceful.
What?
Peaceful.
Peaceful. Okay, so that's when a need is being met. What need might be that's being met?
You want to
No, that's a perfectly good one. So what need is met such that somebody might be feeling peaceful?
Fair play and being fair.
Fairness? Uh-huh. So what's another feeling word? Positive or negative?
Fulfilled.
What?
Fulfilled.
Fulfilled. Okay. So what need might be being met when we feel fulfilled? Contributing. Uh-huh. Can you see how it can be helpful?
So how about nervous?
Nervous.
Yeah,
so
or fidgety.
What might somebody be needing for feeling nervous?
Peace.
Acceptance.
Acceptance. Sure.
As someone who gets nervous a lot, I would say definitely some sense of safety. That it's safe to speak in a situation or to engage.
So what time is it? I wanted to get us in small groups, but I don't want to skip Mary's strong interest to have us do a good piece on observation. So
Observation without evaluation.
I think I have to observe something. Oh, happy day.
Okay. So, All right. So let's suppose. Hopefully we haven't given away too much. Yeah. Let's suppose you saw that, and you know me, and then you go out and you're walking down the street, and you see somebody else who knows me, and they're like, "Oh, hey, have you seen John?" And you want to tell them yeah, and you want to tell them that kind of what happened. You want to give them some sense of what was going on. What might you say?
John was really pissed at me yesterday for no reason at all.
What?
Okay.
You came in, you slammed things around, you sat there, you didn't say anything to me. You obviously were pissed
Well,
at
you were
me.
sitting
For no reason at all.
Okay. What else?
John needs to figure out how to fix his door.
I'm going to shorten some of these just because it's What else?
The leprechaun is messing up his chair.
I'd probably say that you just seemed agitated. Like, ooh, you seemed a little out of sort. Agitated is a good word.
John's trying to tell me something.
It's all about us, isn't it, Gee?
So I feel like you're giving me all the easy. Easy answers. What else? You want someone to have?
I'd probably look at it as an either or maybe many possibilities. Like, John came in this morning and he stormed in. I don't know if he was, maybe in a really big hurry. He was having a bad day. It felt like he was mad at me, but I'm not really sure. Like, leave the possibility open for what it might have been about. If I thought you were a cool guy, I might say I'm a little concerned about John. I'm not sure how to ask him, what's going on. Do you think I should ask or?
So what? Anything else? You want to give this person an accurate sense of what happened.
John walked in, attempted to open up his door, finally used his foot, walked inside, largely lifted the chair above his head and set it down upright.
Slammed it down.
You need some noise.
And there were certain noises made in the process.
Sorry, can you say something about that again? Because John walked in,
That was being
tried to open the door.
I always give too much credit to the site. Walked in, attempted several times, opened up the door, finally used his foot, walked in, the chair was upside down, he set it upright, in the process lifted it above his head.
That was definitely a description of what happened to him.
It's saying about being angry or agitated, you just said what he did. Didn't say he forcefully slammed the chair down. It's all our interpretation.
So I think that's enough. Let's go. All right. So.
I mean, it's practicing for
So yeah, well, I'm going to talk a little bit about this distinction between an observation and an evaluation or a judgment, or an observation mixed with an evaluation or judgment. There's what happened, and there's what you made of it, what it meant to you, or what you thought it meant. And then have you heard of Krishnamurti? Mm-hmm. He's a philosopher, actually a really interesting guy. Some people brought him up thinking he was the next Messiah. and when he turned 21 and they were all ready to, get a bunch of followers after him and so on, he was like, I'm not the Messiah. He kind of refused to take the role. Of course, he went on to be a very, influential philosopher. Well, no, anyway, but one of his quotes I like from his is that observation is the highest, or one of the highest forms of intelligence. That ability to make that distinction, and I say that just to acknowledge how difficult it can be sometimes. One helpful thing in thinking about what an observation is what's something that the video camera would record. I mean, it gets audio and video, but suppose you had a video camera that had smell and touch, and taste as well. All your senses. You would be rich, that's for sure. But what that thing recorded, that somebody else could then experience, those would all be, as I think of them, observations. And anything that wasn't would not be. So with that understanding, what do you see here that seems like an observation? Is this an observation? John was pissed at me?
No.
What's the pissed?
Eval.
It's an emotion, right? I don't know if it's on that list. It may not be pissed. But yeah, and we can't see an emotion, right? So anytime you tell somebody what was going on in a situation, if you're saying what that person was feeling, it's not an observation. And you might be wrong, and even if you're right, people are more likely to feel judged, if you share things that are not observations, even if they're true, than if you just share exactly what you saw. Because exactly what you saw is something that they probably also saw, So they're not going to start fighting with you about what the observation was. And the whole point in this process, as I said, is to get to the vulnerable part, John, when you made a loud floor on the sound with that chair, I felt scared. You might get as far as I felt scared. But if you say, John, when you were really pissed at me yesterday, I might respond to that, and you don't even get to the part where you get to be vulnerable about, I was scared and I want to feel safe. So if your point is to get to that part where you're getting to share about the important thing that something meant to you, you want to ease the way on the earlier part as much as possible. And not to lie or sugarcoat it, but to just keep it to what the observations are. So what about this one? John needs to fix his door.
Conclusion.
What might the observation be?
His door is broken.
Broken.
Are you sure? I would say it was John was having trouble opening his door.
Right. Since it was an air door, we actually don't know if the door was broken or not. Right. But it may be that if you want to get really nitty-gritty about the observation, you could say, I saw the door handle hanging off the door. Maybe that's the way that door is supposed to be. Who knows?
Maybe you were drunk and that's why you were having trouble.
Really?
Who knows?
Nothing.
How about this? A leprechaun messed up his chair?
I got footage of that.
What?
I got footage of that.
You got footage of that? Okay. So if he actually saw the leprechaun before I got there, turned the chair upside down, then...
What about messed up? I mean, maybe the chair was supposed to be upside down. Maybe
Yeah,
it
right.
wasn't messed up.
Right.
It's just the chair was upside down.
Right. So then it'd be a leprechaun turned his chair upside down. How about this one? John seemed agitated. Observation?
It has to be emotional.
Yeah. So what?
Well, if the way it's framed seems to acknowledge, to me, acknowledges that it's a seeming rather than John was agitated. It includes the observer in it. So maybe it is an observation because you're observing your own reaction.
I think that's a very important point.
Yeah.
So, but it could be said a little more explicitly. So, in putting John as the subject of the sentence makes it seem like I'm saying something about him. But yeah, it seemed to me that he was agitated. Even that, I think it's more helpful if you can share what was the actual observation. So, he kicked the door 3 or 4 times. That's something I actually, did. Now, it's sometimes what's going on for you that you want to share, vulnerably, has to do with how you interpreted what somebody did. So again, I think it's helpful to share the observation and then acknowledge, your interpretation of it. So it might be something like, John came in, he kicked the door 3 times before he got it open, and I interpreted that. It seemed to me from that he was angry, and so I felt scared, and so you sort of needed you might have needed the he was angry part to connect, to make that connection.
Is there a sense when you're making observations that you kind of turn off or bracket your empathy? Because you can empathetically pick up agitation. You can feel that in another person at times. But
the point
you don't want to put that in an observation.
It isn't an observation, and the point is not to not have empathy for what's going on for them, but to not mix up when you're talking to them or to somebody else.
Maybe he was reacting to a drug.
What?
Maybe you were reacting to your medication.
And so I'm hearing you trying to have understanding for why I might have been doing what I was doing.
Right. I mean, maybe you weren't agitated. Maybe you were having a physical reaction to it.
Right.
Something.
So that's an important thing. Even if you're having empathy that you think is giving you some sense into what's going on, it may actually be wrong.
Well,
and
sure.
Until you can check with me, you don't know.
But I'm still wondering, it seems like at a certain point with observations, you cut back on your own engagement in the situation so much that you have to be aware of your empathy and you have to kind of set it aside while you're constructing your observation.
You have to be able to separate, right? I mean, the ultimate goal is not to not have the empathy and not have the sense of what might be going on for them, but just to be able to distinguish in your own head, and then when you're saying to somebody, to be able to distinguish between what actually happened and what you've interpreted from. Because especially if you are wrong, that's going to be a very helpful thing to have been able to separate.
So what I find myself doing in this is I got a clear picture in my mind about what was going on for you. And then in this exercise, I find myself going back, looking for, trying to remember particular behaviors that justify it. So to me, I'm wondering how useful it really is to pretend to ourselves that there's that our description of objective occurrences is actually unbiased, because it's a selective memory. The things that didn't fit into that didn't do it. I'm picking out certain behaviors that justify what I'm picking up.
I think you're totally right for us to be cautious even about what we think we observed, because I don't know about you all, I've had experiences where I thought for sure something happened, and maybe we'll never know because there was no videotape, but 3 or 4 other people who were there all saw it a different way, and my memory, adjusted in some way to be different.
Cognitive bias. It goes more than memory. Cognitive biases.
I mean, so depending on how hairy a situation is, you might want to put that caveat in front of. So what I saw, what I remember seeing, kind of acknowledge, hey, it's just your memory. What you saw was X, Y, Z. What about this one? John is trying to tell me something.
Evaluation.
Yeah. Okay. John stormed in, might have had a bad day, I'm concerned.
Evaluation.
All of it?
The stormed in is kind of imprecise. It kind of begs follow-up questions like, well, what do you mean stormed in?
Right.
Well, he was having a hard time opening the door and he kicked it a few times and he came in pretty briskly and.
Right. Because storm is a metaphor, right? There wasn't actual lightning and thunder. But there can be a fuzzy edge there. If the situation is not hairy, it might be enough to say he stormed in. But if it's a really hairy situation, you might want to be as precise as he kicks the door.
I was just wondering when Christina said even briskly, at what point do adjectives kind of infiltrate?
You can get as nitty gritty as you want, and my experience having experimented with this stuff a lot is it amazes me how the tiniest bit of evaluation or interpretation can be something that sets somebody off, and I'm like, I really should have tried to stick to something that was purely descriptive. I mean, even then you can run into trouble. But
isn't there, it seems to me like there would be a point where you water down your observation so much, like you walked in, you up, like the one I gave, which seems like more like script, it like doesn't capture to me what actually happened.
I think the challenge here is to learn how to give observations such that you can give somebody just the observation, and there's a good chance they'll make the same evaluation you did. Or they'll at least understand the evaluation you did. So yeah, when you say it this way, it doesn't have all the energy, of what I did. So John walked in, tried to open the door, used his foot. So what could you say that would give more sense of what?
Well, when you use your foot, I felt afraid.
Well, that gives your response, but we're talking about just the observation part now.
Oh, okay.
So I mean, other people have said earlier he kicked the door several times, right? Which is more than used, and 3 times is also important data. Whatever I did it several times. That gives more sense of it.
You don't even know that you're trying to open the door.
I never saw it.
Yeah, if you take this to getting to pure observation, it becomes very, very difficult. Maybe it's this particular example, but to actually get down to what you saw.
Yeah, no, I think try to open the door. There are circumstances where it will matter to be that picky, but I think just the fact that you're thinking that way, probably means you're able to make these decisions to a certain degree. But you can say you don't have to say you tried to open the door. John came up, he put his hand on the doorknob, he turned it, it did not open. He kicked the door several times. It finally flew open. What about my face? Nobody's made any.
But even finally flew open. Finally adds a certain rhetorical thing to it.
You're right. Yeah, no, I snuck it in. Yep, exactly. What?
You were smiling.
I was smiling when I did it?
I think it was a grimace.
Oh.
Okay.
I think Turtle giggle.
Did we say that your face was in a 90-degree or 7 teeth showing?
I mean, I think this is where you can go, to the acknowledgement, that John kind of pointed to with theme, So, he was frowning. I interpreted it as he was angry. But making some reference to what literally was on somebody's face.
Even maybe it seemed like he was frowning. I wasn't frowning. It was my face. So.
Yeah.
The important part of this is when we get into something like coming back to the very first skit that we did or whatever at the beginning was, I heard you were bad-mouthing me on Facebook. Mm-hmm. There's an opportunity there for her to say, well, what did you hear, and really get down to what my observation was, because it could be, I actually read that you wrote something, or that I merely heard it from somebody else who's made this assumption. It's just try and get to the root of the assumption all the time. It's like just to be able to get back to what the observation was, because you can argue over, yesterday when you yelled at me, John, I felt scared. And he could get tripped off on, I didn't yell at you, and then you're arguing whether or not he yelled, whereas if you just can keep it with the observation of, when you talked to me yesterday and your voice was raised, I felt, and that, I guess you could still say I didn't have a raised voice.
This observation stuff doesn't prevent, sometimes you can give a clean observation and somebody is still going to react, it doesn't avoid all problems, but it avoids a whole bunch of problems. So yeah, the example you gave is like, you could have not even said, I heard, you said on Facebook. You said some horrible stuff on Facebook yesterday. And it's like, I wasn't even on. Like, did you read it yourself? Well, no, so-and-so told me about it. And you're beginning to take that part.
Just assumptions in general, though. I mean, one of the things that I did for a while was, and I understand it's supposed to be some Native American tribe thing that they do. For everything that they observe, they try and come up with 6 stories of why it might have happened. And I did that for a while as a practice for everything that I observed. When I thought that, when I thought somebody was doing this to me, or they were upset, or they were right, I would always come back and go, okay, what are 6 stories for that? And I practiced that for a while, for about a month. And real clearly I started on seeing that, because there could be 6 stories to everything, it meant that why in the world would I latch on to any one of those explanations? If I really wanted to understand what was going on, then I need to be asking questions and not just assuming. And that's a real big one. And one thing I'd encourage you all to do is just, put 10 pennies in your pocket, in one pocket in the morning, and transfer them over to the other side every time you see an observation that's being made by somebody that has evaluations. And just start noticing it. And it really makes a big difference.
You probably need more than 10.
Yeah, but if you did it 10 times a day, you're on a good track. You're going to start seeing it everywhere then. It's not going to take you long to start seeing it.
So there's lots more we could go into on all of these, but we're getting close to the end of time, so I just want to give one kind of overview bit, and then one other thing to hand out, and then there'll be some more general resource announcements. There's a way that a bunch of these things hang together that can be very helpful. And I draw them this way because, so we've just been talking about the observation, which is about the very concrete, specific, what actually happened out here in the world. And when we are trying to share vulnerably about what's going on for us, we often, it's helpful to start with that, start with the clean thing about what happened out there, then get to the vulnerable thing of how I felt, and what need of mine was met or not met. And this is good for positive stuff as well. We've been focusing on the conflict, right? But one, I talked about celebration as a need earlier, is a really important one. Boy, if you really want to communicate, an appreciation to somebody in a way they'll get, try this bit of being really vulnerable and see how different it is if you don't already do it that way. But tell them, what they did, how you felt, what need of yours was met or not met. And if there is something you wanted to ask for, then I draw it this way because you want to come back out again and make that as specific as possible. What do you want somebody to do? So it's like if you're vague about what they did and you end with, and I want you to not do that anymore. They could go, okay, fine, I won't do that anymore. But you haven't actually told them what it was. They've agreed to kind of nothing. So sometimes it can be difficult for us to asking for what we want. But it's actually very helpful to the other person if they know exactly what it is they can do that would make your life better. Yeah, and I mentioned earlier the distinction of request from demand, but we don't have time to go deeply into that right now. But if you want to know more, ask me. So I think this is a very helpful thing to remember. Like, start with something as concrete as possible, bring it to whatever is deep, and really be open and vulnerable about that. And then come back out with this specific, and brave a request as you can. Yeah. Any questions or thoughts on that?
Just an observation.
Yeah.
There's an acronym there of OFNR.
Yeah.
And if you can hang on to those OFNR, it's an observation without evaluations, connecting with the feelings, the needs, and making the request. I found in starting to practice this language, because it is kind of a second language that we don't know, and it's hard to practice it in a community that doesn't use it often. I found that hanging on to that and actually taking some time to walk away from the situation and then doing the OFNR, like I spent the day doing that the day that the Facebook page came down. It was like, how am I going to express myself so that I'm heard? And I really came back to the OFNR. I'm going to make the observation, the feeling, the need, the request. And it really helped me get prepared to tell people how I felt about that. So you don't always have to do it right in the moment. You can walk away from poor communication or take some time before you come into that communication and think about what you want to say and really look at that observation, feelings, needs, and requests.
And I sometimes when I'm like really upset and I'm trying to, okay, how do I want to do this using nonviolent communication, I remember, oh, I'm supposed to do this oftener, and that helps me remember the OFNR.
Oftener.
And often the first step is just noticing. In fact, the first step is noticing after the fact. So you walk away from a situation, you're like, that was a time when I could have tried to do this. That's a step forward. That's a step forward from just doing, and going and getting your friends to agree with you about how bad the person is. The next step is to be aware in the moment. Like, now it's a moment when I could do something differently. And then you don't somehow, but at least you noticed, And then from there, it's, actually trying to do something different in the moment. And it may not go well, the first however many times. But it's, awareness is the first step, and you take it from there. And another thing, actually, I do want to, we have a few minutes, I do want to go a little bit into this request versus demand piece. Because it doesn't have to take on long. It's actually very similar to what a couple of people have brought up. What if I don't really feel empathy? How can I get there? So your request at the end, I did speak to this a little briefly earlier. Your request at the end is going to be more successful the less attached you are to it. The more you are okay hearing a no. You know something is a demand if the person says no, or you imagine the person saying no, and you go, then you were attached. And that's, you gotta have empathy for yourself, right? The thing is really important to you, whatever it is. But it can help a little bit if you remember the reason that I talk about the needs as abstract is to separate them from the specific request, the specific strategy. So whatever that request was that would meet your need, there are no doubt many other requests you could make of that person or of other people that might also meet your needs. So one thing we say sometimes is hold on to your request lightly and your needs tightly. I think in the long run, hopefully you can hold your needs lightly as well. But so you're in demand if your response to a no would be like, and that's kind of like when you're on the listening end and you don't want to have empathy. And so what you do then is, okay, I need more understanding first. I'm not going to go to the person yet and ask, because I'm not ready to ask in a way where I won't be all upset if they don't do what I want. So I want to spend more time with myself or with somebody else listening to me and get like how important this need is to me, and so on, and maybe do some thinking about all the different requests I could make to meet this need if this particular one doesn't work out. And then I'll be more able to go to that person and express this vulnerably and make that request with as much of a genuine openness to whatever they are going to say to it. Because the goal, I think, for all of us, and again, this to me goes to the politics of what we're here about, we all want to be in a world where we're not the ones running the show any more than anybody else is the one running the show. So we want to have respect for somebody else not being willing to do something. And if they aren't, then we want to find some way to be able to go forward from it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I like that unattachment to the request, because that makes it more of a effort to engage than to achieve some outcome. That makes it a relationship.
Right. So when I'm asking to find out if you would like to or not. My question is an inquiry into what you would like to do, rather than I'm going to try and get you to do what I want you to do. Yeah. And then I'm trying to collaborate.
Do you think you could?
Yeah. And then if they say no, you again have the choice. You can try to listen to express some understanding of why they're saying no, or you can maybe I wasn't vulnerable enough. Well, can I say a little more about why I wanted that? Are you willing to hear that? And that also, hopefully, you can do this request. Are you willing to hear that? Like, really? You are? Okay, let me try and share a little more. All right. We are pretty much at time. On the other side of the needs list, there's a list of some online resources for art and communication, or nonviolent communication, or compassionate communication. And my contact info if you want to connect more about it.